we were super aware, like a few hundred years ago, of the political system, we might realize, oh, this hereditary dictatorship stuff is not actually that dope. I guess people will move past that someday, because also God, I've never seen him other than people. You can imagine somebody who's like really at odds with their time, and they can't do anything but live in it anyway.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today with somebody I'm excited to talk to because he's a wonderful musician and somebody who's been living the homeless romantic lifestyle. And he's out there in California right now. We got Justin Lepard. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good to be on the show.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you. We just want to talk about what it was like living in Europe versus living in the United States in the van life. And I was saying, it's incredibly hard to find any peace in Europe, even though that the people are more kind of nice and well-adjusted and educated, and they have health care. There's just they're nice, but there's no middle of nowhere. Like we can't get away off the grid so much. But where are you calling from? Where are you?
I'm in Figuera Mountain, so I can like move around a little bit. It's absolutely gorgeous down here. So down there is the Santa Ynez Valley. So if you go west from LA, which you can do because the coastline curves around, so you can get to Santa Barbara, and then if you go up the coast a little more, that's where I am now. Yeah. So it's gotten harder and harder. My story sort of is I've gotten pushed further and further away from LA the more successfully I've been able to get to remote areas. Because like we went, my wife and I, from living in a car, but in LA when we really needed to be hustling around excessively. But then COVID hit and we got the van itself, and then kind of had to be more committed to it because it's not quite the same gas as the Prius was and all of that. So we have gotten better at finding these places, but with LA, you got to go like 2 hours away at least before you can find a decent.
So what's your hustle strategy? What do you go into town and you play cello and you try to wrangle up some money and then try to get out of town, or?
Yeah, more or less, except it is a little bit more like organized and streamlined. I'm really fortunate. Like I basically have the same like cello gigs that any other unknown but otherwise like professional musician has. And I get a lot of my work through a gig salad, which I'm happy to through a website, which I'm happy to share. The name is Gig Salad. Gig Salad's actually been really dope. I've been able to build up my like freelance and then just be able to be committed. Like I'm always updating my YouTube, and so I'm always updating the examples on that site and some of the coolest projects people have reached out about. And I'm able to be listed in both LA and Portland. So during the warm months, we'll go up to a couple hours outside of Portland for like half a year, and then we can come down here. That's like the new strategy. So it's a bit piecemeal. It's like any other freelance, but I'm finally understanding why some people would like poo-poo their freelance when I was just like trying to get gigs at all. And the reason is that it can be super draining and then like have a bunch of negative feedback loops. Like right now, I'm not that incentivized to grow in-person gigs, even though I still make most of my money from in-person gigs, because it takes a lot of energy. We have to plan things really carefully. It's a lot more wear on the car. It takes me out of my normal routine, which is keeping me like solid as a player and as a person anyway. So then there's like negative feedback loops. But then when it comes to anything remote, whether it be some recording project I can do remotely, or I mean that's mostly it. Sometimes do other technical things to help people. That at least barely takes me out of the routine. Doesn't have the same wear and tear, and ultimately even the in-person gigs I'm getting because of the content I'm making. So I'm incentivized more to keep putting work into making cool content and trying to connect with people online. But it's kind of like a weird mixture that I'm also happy about, because even though I pretty much play for privileged enough clientele to have a decent budget, at least it is still, doing something in person for people, which music definitely ought to be. That's like the one thing I dislike slightly. And I also put this plan together before I was anti-capitalist, but that is the one thing. It's like, at least make like the music free online. Like I just made all my music that I made free. on Bandcamp, because it's like, man, I'm not gonna like be making money from that anyway. It's silly. Like, I want people to listen. Like, I don't make music because I don't.
Yeah, that's
Because I don't think it's like going to be meaningful. Yeah.
that's the distinction between people that. So I remember some people saying, "Well, I don't want people to steal my stuff and steal my stuff." It's like, dude, we live in an age where people are giving it away for free. And the real, do you think the real fruit of real, like especially acoustic music, is experiencing it in person?
There's undeniably something to in person. And I think that for like years, I would try to record cello and be super frustrated that I could not get a recording to be as epic as it was in person. I've had to put a lot of work into that to like finally get to a place where I'm starting to do it. Even so, the mediums are just different, you know? Like with a recording, you either have to have a very dynamic recording that's not going to punch as much, or you have to have a recording that ends up sounding more flat because you wanted to get it loud enough. In person, you just make it louder. You know, like it. So it's definitely a super different game. Both are super valid. And I do have a speaker now, and I'm really hoping this year I'm just going to start doing it. When like people ask me to come play and it's more casual, I'm bringing the speaker, I'm playing my electronic music, and I'm improvising on top of it. Because that's what I love the most. That sort of stuff.
Yeah. Freedom, and then being there in person and having the excitement of being there in person. I miss that, but I have also decided to abandon that for the sake of just, sanity or whatever, not being in public, coronavirus, all these things. Springtime comes around, I usually pick up the instruments and I start playing. But, I used to record all the time. I gave up on it, but it was my number one first fucking love is overdubbing and stuff like that. And I miss that. I do. How did you get started traveling and living the van life?
Well, and just one thing I wanted to say is I was talking to my friend who's in the healthcare profession, and I started to tell him that people don't realize how apt musicians are for burnout. But then I realized, oh wait, no, because everybody knows that almost every musician eventually quits. So actually, it is common knowledge that musicians have a high burnout.
Yeah, you know
so
what?
Anyway.
Fuck this.
So yeah, my quick life story is I grew up in Nebraska. I had like an otherwise good home, like I had loving parents and stuff, but I was also very sheltered and very awkward in school and didn't know that I had ADHD, which I only found out as an adult. So I always felt like, pretty anxious and stuff. And I was like very, very concerned with issues in the world, like from a young age. Like the first job I remember wanting to have as a vet, I was vegetarian for like almost 10 years, vegan for like 4 years. I would go through these phases, but basically, I was also concerned with myself. So anyway, that twin sort of anxiety with like a lot of self-introspection, that can obviously border on narcissism in what I'm about to say, is like what makes someone a musician. You have something you want to explore. It's very difficult to explore. Slightly different types of people will become visual artists or writers, but the musician just has a particular way of wanting to get to know themselves and to be part of the world, a very flowy sort of thing. But also there's like discipline involved in music. Like you can't get good at music without discipline. It's like just one of those true things about it. Hopefully you can do it in a not toxic way, have discipline. But so anyway, yeah, so that's kind of like why I ended up practicing music. And, I obviously knew that I needed to make money from it because that's the whole name of the game. So that wasn't a mystery, but I also knew that I needed to like not have to go to a school like place every day because I have ADHD. I didn't know that, but I did know that I like to work like when I want to work. And so that just led me. I got like a good cello teacher. I was very lucky in that way, like to have somebody from Juilliard when I was in the middle of nowhere, essentially. So he helped me with like everything classical, and then I went to the school there and had private jazz lessons with the trumpet teacher there. So everything's pretty badass. And then I did actually get into a contemporary classical music festival, a really big one in Switzerland. So I have some European experience from like a few trips back and forth. So I definitely will vibe with the differences between Europe and America. Europeans being more sane, but it's also a little less freedom, perhaps, in some ways.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so then it was like, what's next? And I got into a grad school in Santa Clarita, California. And at the same time, I got married. And I mean, the plan was not to come to school to be responsible. The plan was to come to school to tear things up, to make connections, to really, shave the edges off what I was working on so I could really start to make like a career. And just immediately the housing struggle hit us. Like, even though we had some money, like had a few grand to try to get started, it was also like, okay, well, we don't want to sign a lease before we get a job. So like my wife's trying to get a job, and it's the classic apply to like hundreds of jobs, even things that she's like done, but you just cannot get hired unless you're like way overqualified for your job. That's like the reality, especially on the coasts and in big cities. So it just kind of spiraled into like, fuck this, I'm dropping out of school, but I'm also going to stay committed to getting good at cello and to making the hustle work and to just doing the gig grind. Some months were better than others, but pretty much from the beginning, I was at least able to make some money from what I could do in LA. So that was at least encouraging. And just a few years later, and it's kind of the same stuff, but it's evolved.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't believe that it's gotten much easier since the time that I actually did it and because of Corona and all these things. But I want to hear your experiences trying to get into a place, because for us, it was impossible. I had go up to Northern California, trim a bunch of weed, come back down, have 10 grand, 20 grand in my pocket, and then be looking for a place near San Francisco Bay Area and stuff. And just, they want, for you to even fill out an application, they want $40.
And you're probably not going to get it without first and last month rent plus a deposit. It's pretty hard.
How can anybody afford that? And how long can this sustain before the whole fucking system collapses?
It is already collapsing, my friend. You don't hear the conservatives whining about the homeless all the time in the cities. It's like, so the prices of the houses go up and then the homeless go up. I mean, conservatives would have us believe that pretty much there's no flaw with the system. There's only a flaw with people. But what they don't realize is that there is an entire field called systems dynamics, which I heard Richard Wolff, I believe, the Marxist economist, talking about. So I went and looked it up. When I'm talking about negative and positive feedback loops, that actually comes from systems dynamics. And this is stuff that comes out of MIT. I mean, this is stuff that's typically pro-capitalist and used by businesses to figure out how to gain efficiency in this stuff. So what I'm saying is, like, when people put their money into things, they actually believe that systems dynamics is a useful field that's accurate to the bottom line of companies. And the first rule of systems dynamics is to always assume that people are coming at things in good faith and with good motivations. And that if there's a problem of behavior, it is a problem of the system in which those people find themselves. Because people are, for the most part, rational actors who are making the best decisions for themselves, short-term and long-term, but a lot of the time short-term. So systems dynamics is like, all right, so we're not going to just blame people. That doesn't make sense. We're going to look at the system and find where there's negative feedback loops, positive feedback loops, time delays that aren't being accounted for. They draw whole maps. So, it's just stupid. It's such a weird lie.
Predicated on the fact that we really assume that people are inherently good, and especially capitalists, that they're not inherently greedy or have any ability to get a little bit off their morals in order to make a little bit more profit. It's completely fucking false. You probably heard me and Vosh talking about planned obsolescence and the idea that motherfuckers make things to break so that they can sell more next year, or fast fashion and things like this where you throw it in the garbage. And big shout out to my man Richard Wolff, because he is fucking awesome and he knows his shit and he's one of the good voices in the world. But if that were true, this thing that you're talking about, then we wouldn't need to legalize stock buybacks, where companies can come in and buy their own stock in order to make it look as though everything's on the up and up in their world, because this idea that capitalism and exponential growth and we have to make more than we did the last year, it's like it's ludicrous and impossible. you know?
Well, one of the things that any leftist knows is that we're in late stage capitalism. And as a result, one of the things that's easy to overlook is that capitalism at one point was a pretty progressive idea. And if you look at capitalism in a situation coming out of feudalism, it actually really does look like it's going to increase freedom, because you're going to allow people to willingly trade their time, and they're going to be able to like create things instead of there having to be planned things. Before capitalism, it wasn't assumed that you could both make money and like make more value. Like you had to spend money to convert it to value. The magic of capitalism is there's like the labor surplus and other types of surpluses, which I do believe in. Sorry, Marx. But because of those surpluses, we can get that additional value while also creating value. So that sort of stuff is like really actually a step forward, at least, because you need, probably some money system, even in an anarchistic sort of situation, you need like some grounding force there. The problem is it's so abstract now. It's not about a person's accumulation of a certain number of things that represent their value that they can carefully like save and stuff like that. It's not like that at all. It's like we have fees everywhere. Like even in the van, we're probably going to lose money being in California this year. And like, I don't know if we're like seriously considering getting a trailer and trying to make just Oregon work like through the winter months, because we seriously always lose money here. And in Oregon, which I think Oregon is like, apart from all the racism and xenophobia, especially in the past, it's like actually a pretty libertarian socialist dream place. There's like a huge emphasis on freedom. There's comparatively like a lot less religion. You don't get these bullshit fees everywhere. There is minimal regulation. So you have kind of the best of what the conservative libertarians want, while also having people like try to look after each other. Yeah. Anyway, I got sidetracked. But the thing about capitalism is, once it gets super abstract and people are it's just numbers, and you have to study jargon just to be able to interact with something that ought to just be like a middleman for value. Right. I mean, that is the fundamental problem. The rest of us are still working with money as though it were a representation of value that we could save and we could trade and we could use. But it's not like that. It just sand slipping through your fingers all the time.
Right.
If you're not
like poor
on the other side.
And that's the thing, is poor people like us, we exist in a world where we use money. We use money and to get the food and like the bare, and we survive on $500,000 at a time and nothing more. While rich people survive off of debt, and they buy everything with debt. They buy everything with loans from banks and stuff like this, and credit and everything like this, and we just can't get our hands on it. So, and this is a twisted concept that only existed since the 80s, is like the credit report and your credit score and things like this. It essentially just made life harder for everybody who really wants to oppose capitalism, that you're not going to be able to, if you don't play the game to the tune that we're playing, then you're not going to be able to survive. And and the noose gets tighter and the noose gets tighter. But I dig Oregon in the sense that you're right. This conservative, it's like a mix of conservative and liberal. You have like racist, redneck hippies who are growing mushrooms. I'm like, okay,
right,
okay, I'm down.
Like, I suspect that among that crowd, there's like a high prevalence of magical thinking, superstitious thinking. But it's kind of like when I go play for a Christian church. I just don't bring it up unless they ask me my opinion, which they don't, because we're all vibing. I mean,
is it like, and this is why the people that I have on my show, it's just like, hey, if being nice is first and foremost, totally fucking paramount to anything else you can be. And if I have vegans who are saving the world by not eating animals, if you're a jerk, fuck you. Like, I can't help you. Like, we need to start to learn how to treat each other better, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So be nice first. So if Christians, I have people that are hunters in my neighborhood, and if you're nice, I'm nice. Period. Now, I disagree with you in private and talk shit about you. And if I can stop them.
A lot of people have uninformed opinions. Like, that's just always going to be true. That's why I think that anarchism is a lovely philosophy, but you're probably not going to put it into practice. You probably need a structure.
Well, isn't it about human nature that there's some people that are comfortable being alpha males, and then there are some people that are comfortably being subservient, and then there are people like us in between who are just like, I don't want to dominate, nor do I want to be dominated.
I mean, I think that just sounds like the alpha, beta, sigma thing. So I don't know if it's quite that neat from a true biological standpoint. But yes, I have noticed like some people are happier with there being order. There's people who like there being power because it makes it clear what they should be attached to. And if you truly want to celebrate the diversity of humanity, you have to think that that's cool too. Like just, if that is a genuine expression of the person, then we're still going to make it so that they have as much autonomy as, they still deserve, right? As a human.
So we can actually talk about it a little bit. We can fantasize about an anarchist society and how because it's a great idea, at least to break down with a patriarchy and all the really high up controls of society where 100 people control the lives of millions, which is what we have now.
And also age.
Wait.
Like I'm 30. I'm like one way in which I'm like unequivocally privileged in a way that I wasn't as a child is I'm like a big 30-year-old dude with like a big voice. And I don't have any problem with people taking me seriously. But I had a lot of ideas when I was like 6, 8, 12, and nothing. I could not. Yeah.
Shut up. You're just a kid.
Yeah. Well, I remember trying to volunteer at a hospital when I was 12. I was like very motivated because I think there had been something I went to the hospital for. And they're like, well, we can't have people before they're 14. So I hope that you still care when you're 14. And puberty happened, so I didn't quite care in the same way. Yeah, 2 years later.
Oh man, I'm busy. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at least you were a good person right off the bat. You had some empathy deep within you. You thought, well, I would like to help people.
Yeah, and no political framework. I mean, my parents are progressive compared to other people in Nebraska, but they're like, at least my dad is like definitely like capital L liberal. And I think part of that is just he went to like Ivy League schools. So for him, the system works well enough that it's like, it's just hard for him to fully like wrap his mind around how that's actually that's a feature of the oppression. That's not like a counterexample.
Well, we could probably say that capitalism under the certain amount of proper socialist kind of regulations could be awesome, but it's the overreach.
Did you hear about what they did in Norway where they nationalized an industry that was doing quite well? So that they had like made a bunch of money from this industry. It all is like being invested, and that's what's funding all their social programs.
So, I mean, makes sense to me. This is exactly what I just said, right? Yeah. What was it? What kind of industry was it?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Something big. Unfortunately. Something big. But something
big enough that it was, yeah.
So they regulated them so that they weren't like poisoning people or doing stuff like this, but then they turned around and taxed them in a way, and then they said, okay, money is for everything else in society. Is that right? I mean, that makes sense.
It's possible that it's money that was made that is now that like chunk of money is like invested into enterprises. So it is making us money from returns, but that return goes directly to social programs. I think that was more how it works.
And they have enough. So this is like kind of the Deng Xiaoping form of Chinese capitalism. So when Mao got kicked out and all these people died and it was not so great, authoritarian communism, nice try. Hey, nice try. They kicked him out and they got in this guy, Deng Xiaoping, and he said, okay, we're going to take a little dash of communism, going to keep some of that idealism, and we're going to take some of what the West is doing, and we're going to sprinkle that together. And right now, that formula is beating everybody in the world, which loosely I understand it as private companies who are overseen and managed and regulated heavily by a socialist kind of government where they want to make sure, okay, you're a corporation, you're doing your business, but we're going to make sure that you're not doing anything that's really unpatriotic and against the working people and the regular people of this country. And I think I'm not going to sit here and say China's great or anything, but hey, what an idea.
China has surveillance, and obviously the government can be punitive with it. But the U.S. actually has more surveillance by private companies. There are more cameras on us here than there are in China, and at least in China, you will have a place to live. I don't know. I think that. So Richard Wolff was even talking about how the whole Chinese thing, like people want to credit it to the capitalism, but the capitalism would not have lifted 1 billion people out of poverty were it not for the redistribution that actually got the money to those people so that they were not in extreme poverty anymore.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, if you make a ton of money, but it's all at the top. Yeah.
Yeah. So this happened in the from the 50s to like the 70s in America. What happened was post World War II, we had all this great, like, we had good work ethic. We had, everything was going swimmingly. Like we had wealth in our country and we were manufacturing our own stuff and people had jobs and people had work unions and there was regulations against stuff, you know, and you could buy a house with a year's salary. You could own a home and you could buy a car for $500, which even with inflation, way cheaper than it is today. And what happened was, capitalism is good for working class people, but it's also good for the capitalists at the same time. And so as the wealth of the, the working class people, they're doing pretty good. But the capitalists are also doing really good. Well, at some point, they get enough money to where the scales tip and they can start doing things like lobbying their balls off to where they can say, you know what, we want some new laws that favor us. And the working class people just could not compete with that kind of influence in politics. And we just started to see the deregulation of every fucking industry to where now everything is tilted to their direction. And now we're all scratching our heads like, oh, it's trans people. That's why everything's going. No, it's the subsequent deregulation.
Dude, poor trans people.
I feel bad for him, and whatever is coming next for every subversive person out there, whether they're anarchist or trans or hippies that smoke weed or punks or socialists or just regular people who are animal rights activists. It doesn't matter. Anybody with empathy is about to be thrown under the bus big time. Because I see a wave of fascism coming that's not going to be stopped, no matter if we get rid of Trump or we get rid the seeds of hate and xenophobia and reactionary politics has already been planted. We're just waiting for them to bloom into a fucking horrible mess.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of the same with climate change. I don't think that it's correct. I think anybody can just search their feelings and realize this stuff is not yet to come. This is what it feels like to actually live through phases that can be summed up as America's decline into fascism, into the 21st century, or the global warming that caused so many weather changes that'll last for millennia. We're already starting that stuff. I mean, it already is significantly different to van life from like 2 years ago, and I've had to deal with like fires like every year, smoke in the sky, heat waves in places where it's not supposed to do that. So we're already seeing it. It's already imploding. So I guess one thing that I really thought would be important to talk about, because the problems are endless and well documented, but the thing that's hardest, I think, because it's the hardest for me at least, is what you can actually do. Praxis, in other words. And so I did want to talk a little bit about, and I feel like you already touched upon it tangentially upon something I did want to talk about, which is like self-reliance, the self-reliance part of van life, for example, because as cars get more expensive, if you actually crunch the numbers, it doesn't make sense to buy a new car. Like I have a 2000 Dodge van. Those were extremely well-made cars. The engine still works fantastically. We've had a lot of work done on it, like out of necessity for it being a 20-year-old van, but it's so freaking reliable apart from that. And I like paid attention enough that now I'm starting to be able to work on it myself, and it's just the parts. But it's not just that I'm spending less. I'm actually doing a better job because I can get all the parts. I can service, like we're going to service the whole brake system in the front, not just the brake pads, which are then going to get worn by the rotors, not just the brake pads and rotors, which are going to get worn by the hub, the whole thing. And for less than if I went to somebody, but it'll last longer too. And I think that stuff like that is like super overlooked, super important. Americans don't realize our history and that we weren't even in many ways as oppressed as we are today a few hundred years ago. Like a few hundred years ago, if you were like a settler, you likely experienced mercantile socialism, where you could expect to own your own business and be a small, like the in-between of capitalist and worker that you and I also are, at least presumably you. I definitely am like, yeah.
Yeah. Whether it's music or art and you're moving along the country, you're an entrepreneur of some kind. Yeah. Sure. But yeah,
so I don't know.
Self-reliance.
Some thoughts you had about.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I totally agree with the fact that I also had a van that was from the year 2000 or before, maybe like a 90s van or something to say. And I became de facto mechanic extraordinaire, because I absolutely had to. I was like, oh yeah, water pump, alternator, fucking brake pads. I can change that shit. And I'm just like a frilly, effeminate man. And I fucking got down there and I had to figure that shit out. And we're moving towards something that's really frightening. You probably heard me and Vosh talking about this is like the BMW had a heated seat thing by subscription. Like in the future, electric cars are all computerized. And if you want special features in your car, like if you want to scoot your seat back, you might have to pay extra in this way. And this is another thing with John Deere tractors is they're doing this where they can shut them down remotely. And if they do the same thing like Apple phones does is like slow them down when it's time to renew the phone. They will lock up your tractor if you are late on a payment, or they will say that, oh, the system needs an update and there's something wrong with the computer. They can just cause glitches in a piece of machinery that in the past we would have been able to own outright. Think about how important it is to get food for your community as a farmer, that you would have to fucking go to plow your field and then be like, oh no, I need to contact corporate and stuff. This is just another way, microtransactions and all this bullshit, that they're going to shackle us and so that they can squeeze out just a little bit more profit and make it look like to their shareholders that everything's on the up and up, when in fact everything is not on the fucking up and up. And there's nothing left. You can shake us by the ankles, but you're basically down to the pocket lid.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think is a good thing to push back against if it comes up in conversation is the claim that capitalism has delivered us, the greatest like goods that we've ever had. And that is super wrong, because human labor has given us the goods that we have. We have so many more people post-industrial revolution. So the feedback loop of more people are able to create more stuff, which is able to get better, is why we have the iPhone and nothing else. It's inevitable that there's going to be technological progress. But what we have right now are products that suck. Like half the things I buy from Amazon don't work because they save money by not having a quality control department and you have to send it back. Things that do appear to work don't tend to last very long, the planned obsolescence. You cannot tell me that this is good. Also, there's so many companies competing that's actually an inefficient system, because at any given point, there's an average of 150% of the goods that people need that are made so that there can be that competition in the first place. It's actually a terrible economic model when you consider the entire system. So yeah, that's like, don't.
And another thing is like the big argument with capitalism is look at all the technology we built. Don't forget that fucking authoritarian communists beat you to space. They beat your ass to space, and once you found out they went to space, you got real nervous and thought, we got to do it. And it wasn't private industry that competed either. NASA was heavily funded by the U.S. government and the U.S. taxpayers. So. And this is what I don't believe is like the technological, we have to have all these advancements in order to, and capitalism is the only thing that can provide that. First of all, that's bullshit. And we both know that. And second of all, I really lean heavily on Ted Kaczynski's thing when he says, do we even need all this shit? What the Industrial Revolution was the greatest mistake we ever made. God bless him.
That actually leads me to my a question I wanted to ask you. It's a dual question.
Sock it to me.
I'll make it short so that you can talk. I wanted to know your opinion on two extreme positions that I think, like anarchism, hold philosophical value: antinatalism and then anarcho-primitivism, which is what you were just saying.
Yeah, so that's basically like going back to like a real That's being anarchist, but also casting out most technology and trying to really live off the land, basically, right?
Which is where Ted Kaczynski was in his mindset, to my understanding.
Respect, Ted, Uncle Ted.
He
Yeah,
also was anti-woke though, so he's a bit of a
right. At the
mixed
beginning
bag.
of his manifesto, for people that don't know, he just ranted on and on about the left, and there was some painfully true things about in there. But the fact that the left stereotypically represents empathy is huge for me, and so I have to take a grain of salt. But I can that's the thing, is I can read Ted Kaczynski and pick out the parts that I think I agree with, and then say, okay, this other stuff is a bit hateful and a bit, like, you could tell it was a bit pointed, like somebody had screwed him or somebody pissed him off about the specific thing. But on the whole, why not? I mean, holy shit. This guy told everybody climate change was going to happen. It was going to be terrible. He had an IQ of 160. He wasn't vegan, but he would go out into the woods, and I assume that he ate fucking dandelions and grasshoppers and mice. Right on, dude. That's how extreme I am, in the sense that I really do believe that every piece of technology that's come out maybe in the last 200 or 300 years has done really nothing for us, and that we're not really prepared for it with our primitive brains, because evolution is not now technology that we're creating is moving faster than our brains can evolve.
That's the biggest problem.
And people walk around saying, I'm depressed. Yeah, of course you're depressed. Of course you're mentally ill. Of course you're stressed out. Nothing could be further from the truth. Have you read this Noah Harari book? It's The Brief History of Mankind. And he basically talks about how in the caveman days, everybody lived like a long lifespan. When we were nomadic, traveling cave people, we lived 70, 80 years, no problem. It was only in the last 10,000 years when we settled down, had the agricultural revolution, and decided, hey, let's chill out. We'll stay here. We'll grow some crops. We'll shit basically in our house, and then we wonder why we have all these diseases. Immediately when people started the medieval kind of, or whatever, the beginning of the agricultural revolution, all the way up until like whatever, the 19th century, people only lived a Roman lifespan. They lived 40 years or so. And this was because they shat where they ate and all these diseases that came with it. And so every time we thought, let's be clever, or let's be lazy, and let's have more convenience, and let's have more security, we just totally screwed ourselves. That's what I think.
I mean, for me, I was like very interested in existential philosophy in the years that preceded my political evolution of the last few years, and I still think that some of that stuff is really valid for dealing with politics, even though politics is in some ways not like a macro lens on the universe as a whole. It's still very localized to a brief period of time on a small portion of the universe's sort of domain. And to broaden further than that, it's absolutely true that like shit just happens in the universe, like stuff just collides and it just affects other stuff, and that's still going on. Like us being people who like talk to each other with like ideas are all fundamentally abstractions. They're not like that's not like really what's happening. Like if you really wanted to explain the mechanics of it from a physical sense, you would have to do it in a way that's like really almost dry. But like I think that comes back to the systems dynamic stuff in terms of having empathy for like the human condition. Like stuff will and is just happening, and some of it is like will get ironed out over time. I mean, that's like the different theories of evolution, but like that takes a really long time. So when you have all these rapid changes, and in the grand scheme of things, the Neolithic revolutions are still pretty recent, and just certainly the Industrial revolutions are very recent, you're just bound to have things that haven't settled down yet. So, again, to come back to the big picture, like, if we were super aware, like a few hundred years ago, of the political system, we might realize, oh, this hereditary dictatorship stuff is not actually that dope. I guess people will move past that someday, because also God, I've never seen him other than people. You can imagine somebody who's like really at odds with their time, and they can't do anything but live in it anyway. And I think that that's where a lot of us find ourselves nowadays. It's like we realize the problems, we realize the inevitabilities of climate disaster and political bubbles bursting, like the housing bubbles bursting, but with what you were saying about fascism. And it's like, it might in the end just be predictive power. Like, we might not have the power to stop these things. We might only have the power to preserve our thoughts on it, to make art about it, to be there for each other, because there's just different things that have happened. I'm reading the book 1491 right now, which is about the Americas before Columbus. It's amazing because none of us have any idea the history. I know more about Chinese history from school than I know about American, like long-term, like the different dynasties and stuff. And it's like so unfathomably tragic to picture what they went through with, as much as 80 to 95% of their populations dying. The smallpox affecting people more than Europeans, because it was only like a few thousand people who came over. So there's not a lot of genetic variation among the original American population. So not only are they not exposed, but they also then had a greater propensity to get sick from it. And then they also socially would have customs of sitting by sick people, which definitely spread it further. And you just have, like, how do you even contextualize siblings, friends, teachers? Everybody's just dying. And that's like such an even more extreme version of like what we are going through now, that maybe it's a little balancing. Like, yeah, like sometimes shit happens, sometimes you can't stop it. And then what is in your control is to be educated about it, to try to help about it, to be like on the right side of history about it, and to be able to like, so let's dip into mental health for a second. That was my final point there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think on the call, like I have ADHD. I am now on like Wellbutrin for it, which is like can be used off label for it. I was already doing all this stuff like working out and like eating better and stuff. But like that's been the most specific like thing that I've had that wouldn't otherwise just be a general part of the anxiety depression. So it's like the additional thing other than the sort of anxiety depression you would expect. So I've like really felt the need to get on top of it. And I've been watching the Huberman podcast, Andrew Huberman. Sometimes he has takes that are a bit wonky, but he definitely tries to be just very objective with the science. And I was watching his video about like what even causes depression. And, what's interesting is that mechanically it's dopamine, and you can kind of anticipate what might cause depression from an experience. So like if you have a lot of really good experiences, then it basically raises your baseline expectation. And then when that can't be met, either through repeated exposure causing the adaptation or because things change and you're not able to get that anymore, you get depression. So I've until like a couple weeks ago, when I was really able to like create a new set of plans and feel even more on top of like my health and stuff, I was like depressed, minor depression for a few months this fall. And I think a lot of it is predictable because I had a really nice time in the greater weather of Oregon. We went up there without a single gig booked, but we ended up booking enough over the summer. So how are you not going to get seasonal, affective disorder when there's less than there was? There's less sunlight. There's like people aren't being as social. So when it comes to dealing with the anxieties regarding this political stuff, if you continually feed your fear and hatred of it only, then you are not only creating an addiction pattern where the dopamine you're receiving is tied to feeling bad actually about what's going on, which only makes it worse, but also you're missing a bigger picture that for all of us older than like, for all of us, like the world we're living in is a harder world to live in than it was however long ago. So it makes sense that we would collectively feel additional depression. It makes sense that there would be localized depression and anxiety issues regarding like the knowledge of this stuff. And so this is where like some of the potentially bullshit points about like or individual, like, whatever the self-help world is largely bullshit in like not actually offering real answers to people. But that doesn't mean that like individual responsibility and like self-improvement aren't important for mental health. Like, that's the thing, is like you can only affect so much, and the only way to feel balanced, if not good, about things is to compartmentalize that. You have to make time for your health. If it means like living in a vehicle, there's ways to do it. There's a lot of videos out there. Yeah. If plan in advance, bring some bags so that you can shit in them. That's the best way to do it. Just saying. That I sometimes go out and see people having just their napkins were just thrown on the ground, and it's like, please, please, please do not do that. It only took a few weeks of living full-time van life for us to realize that we have to be pretty planned about our garbage and septic. And it's like, oh, all that infrastructure that like people have built up over the years is actually essential, because we create a lot of waste, and more than we even need to, because of how products are packaged and stuff. But anyways, I do think that as far as the mental health goes, it's like, bro, you have to be able to find it in yourself to come back to some fundamentals, like good diet, taking some time to read. Settlers, 1491 are ones I've read recently that are like amazing. I'm still reading 1491, but like informing the understanding of history, informing the understanding of how the economics actually work, are like the secret ingredients to being able to dismantle conservative talking points, which actually are usually not, whatever they might say about the fiscally conservative right, actually makes sense economically. But it's a very complicated field, so it's not easy to immediately dismantle it either.
What's funny? And conservatism is this misnomer, because they stand for tradition and the old ways and make America great again. Because
we stand for the old ways, because we stand for tribalism and the natural way of living.
But we're not. But we're not liberal or neoliberal either. We stand for an entirely very older fucking system of very basic and very simple ideas. And but mental health. They're talking about. No wonder people are upset, and I think that a certain amount of like getting back to the subtleties of life, and then casting out all the colors and the lights and the hate and the happiness, and don't be happy, don't be sad for a while. Try to recalibrate, and then maybe you'll have a chance. But there's a certain amount of suffering that's just you're gonna have to deal with. That's like part of life, and it does help to some degree.
If you're sad that you're like an atheist and you wish that you had that happiness that they have, well, one, if God existed in the way that they said, that would be terrible, because the world has way too much suffering in it for that to be a good God in any way. But also, the whole point of like left-wing philosophies is building more from the ground up what a human society ought to be. And the thing that philosophically I love most about anarchism is that it's not just something that could be in the future. Like a socialist economy requires politics. It just does. You can't just have a social revolution without it being reflected by the government. But praxis within anarchism is something you can do if there isn't a government or if there is a government.
It's the default setting,
especially around this time. Yeah.
Anytime anything changes, or if society ever is being built up or is breaking away, and we're going in or out of entropy, anarchy is going to just happen. It's like a natural thing.
It's a natural thing, and like. I'm honestly like surprised. Like I went through an extremely like rebellious phase at the end of college, and a lot of that spiral, that at the time it was a spiral, had to do with was me realizing, well, just one, that there are people who don't mind being a little manipulated if it makes them feel safer. I felt that was really messed up. Maybe manipulated is the wrong word, but
that's true.
I was very upset. I was very upset that people wouldn't just take more ownership over these like things that I didn't yet have the context to see the full picture on. But the reason why society is held together is not government or police. The reason society is held together is that humans have and most creatures have a mutual interest in sharing space. That's it.
Symbiosis, baby. We didn't evolve for millions of years as libertarian islands unto ourselves where we say, I don't need anybody. I pay my taxes and I can exist on my own. Like, your existence is predicated on the help of hundreds and thousands of fucking workers and people all over so we evolved to be together. We're supposed to be doing this together, and to deny it is sick. It's really sick.
Yeah.
To pass by homeless people and say, that guy, that's his fault. He must not have worked that hard. That's not my issue. That's fucked. You know, in the 80s, Ronald Reagan, he opened all the mental hospitals. He cut the funding for the California mental hospitals. And so several mental hospitals just basically unleashed all these mentally ill people on the streets. And then, you know, I came to San Francisco maybe 20 years later, and they were all still there. Just trying to survive on the streets, not making any sense, talking gibberish, pushing a shopping cart, you know, and taking drugs.
When we couldn't get proper employment, and we're like essentially as privileged as it gets, apart from financially, but like being straight and white, and my wife especially is very beautiful, could not get a job when we had a place to stay and when we had some money to spend on getting to interviews. How the fuck is anybody getting out? Like, you have to live just fucking 2 days street homeless to realize that it's brutal. It's so brutal. Like, we've only even like been there like for a couple days, and it's like the third level. Hassan calls it the third level homelessness. You cannot be casting fucking. They're working so hard. Like, if you want to reward hard work, those people are working at least as hard as people with jobs for their basic survival as well, and for nothing.
Yeah. And this is where
for not getting good sleep, and you
know what happened like a long time ago. The whole picture perfect idea of capitalism is that there's a main street in town and everybody's got a store, and the shoemaker fixes shoes and the baker bakes the bread and shit. This is something that doesn't exist anymore, thanks to what I said before, the scales tipping in the favor of multinational corporations, big, huge, monstrous entities of people. That the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and so there's no accountability. And Main Street died. Yeah, Main Street died a long time ago, and what came in is Walmart. I went to like Gallup, New Mexico. I would just stop by these random little holes in the wall, and the only place in the whole town, if you need a shoe or if you need a tire or if you need gas or if you need food, you go to Walmart. And all the people in the town work for Walmart because there's no other. But 70, 80, 90% of the profit that store makes, where does it go? Out of town. Out back to Walmart, back to Bentonville, Arkansas, wherever the fuck these yokels are from. And they killed off the ability to have an actual working capitalist society where everybody can. And so what the fuck are we supposed to do? Like, you could either work for a corporate chain, like go work for Pizza Hut or go work for something like this, or go work for one of the very few dying out like public jobs that might be available. You can work at a hospital or work at a library or work at a school or something like this. But they're going to slowly start to privatize all this bullshit to where there's just not going to be anything left for us to do. Like if and I loved my anarchist friends because when their shirt ripped because it's a piece of shit and it was made to break and everything, they'd sew it up and
that's exactly what we're doing. My wife saves us probably more money than I make because she's like selling everything, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, good for her. She knows what's good. Well, yeah, and you're one of the rare ones. And all the times that I travel, I never knew anybody that was so enlightened that they knew, hey, they know how bad you're getting screwed, and you're just waiting for the opportunity to change it. So what?
I mean, I should remind you that I did say that my dad went to 2 Ivy League schools, so I would say that I'm like. I had a leg up in life without a doubt, bro. Like,
but here you're still. I mean, but you're still in the van. So what does that? That says everything about.
It makes it crystal clear. It makes it crystal clear how fucked it is. If you're like a white dude who came from like a good home and you don't own your house and you don't get to choose like what time you spend with your wife and kids or whatever, and you're still like, yeah, I think the system more or less works. You are a fucking idiot, bro. But I think it just has to do with a fear of looking at that situation for what it is and recognizing, well, okay, I guess if I were this collection of traits that people tell me has a lot more prevalent in our society, and it's still really hard for me, instead of just saying, oh, well, I guess that means that it's not real that I have privilege because I struggle too. If instead you're able to be like, well, if that is true, whoa, people are getting so screwed,
Right.
I think that's the real thing to get from that.
I think, and it comes down to the empathy, right? Do you got empathy or don't you have empathy? And for the people that have empathy, they see it clearly and they go, hey, things are just not fair anymore. And then everywhere they look, they say the 99%. And it's like, yes, obviously. And so there are lots of people like us who are on board, even if they have jobs and they're getting by, but they see everything going on and they go, oh man, this is a mess. But then there are these other people who don't want to see it, who are, I'm guessing, just deluded, denying, and they could even be like this kind of rural mentality where these people are diabetic, but they're still going to the fast food places, or have to spend money on diabetes, but don't, conservatives have this amazing innate ability to not care about a subject until it happens to them. And I think this is what's the poison that's making our society rot from the inside out, where, and people have always been like this. Like in the 1960s, you had all these Black Panthers and students and anti-racist and feminist protesters going out saying, hey, we want to change. We want things to be better for everybody, more equal. And and history doesn't talk about this much, there was all these fucking square people that were like, no, we want law and order, and we want police to crack people's heads in and shit like this. And it's like, I don't understand that. And can you imagine, like, I always think about this, it's like, especially with being vegan and stuff, it's like there were people that lived through slavery in the 1800s that knew the whole time that this isn't right, but they lived their entire lifetime just having to deal with it.
It's the same idea as the feudal peasant realizing, yeah, exactly. I did want to say that as far as so I think it should be made clear that, like, obviously everybody who's not in like the top 0.01% is basically working class. Unless you own capital and aren't working, you're working class. And a lot of us are poor too. So, in that way, that's the great equalizer. At the same time, though I preach things like self-reliance, and though I'm glad that my obsessive, I'm not going to say that like it was like an accident that I'm a professional cellist. Like, I've been obsessed with it for a decade and a half, and I have worked my ass off and all of that, and continue to put in a crazy amount of work and continue to make sacrifices that allow me to put in that work, the actual headspace and time to practice and getting hired so that it's actually getting better at it all the time, all of that stuff. It doesn't make it something that's like going to work for everybody. So one of the things, like you were talking about, like one of the things people don't think about is how cool Walmart almost is. Like when you go to a small town Walmart, it is the place that has everything. And a lot of the people who work there it's like one of the best jobs you can have in the town. And they're actually pretty happy. Like we go to Walmart when we're in the place, where that's like the best option for food prices and stuff. They're always, a lot of the people there are like actually having a pretty okay time. The biggest problem is that they don't own it. They're providing this such invaluable service to the community that it pushed all the other business out. But instead of that vertical integration merging, and I said nationalize it earlier, merging and just being regulated by the state, but the efficiency of the organization being subsumed so that it has democratic control by the people, it's being robbed by people who are not giving back anything to society. That is the major flaw. So it's been really nice to see the wave of unions. I think unions are like one of the 2 or 3 most actually practical things that can be done. I've sometimes had the thought that I should but I don't want to spend too much time like not working on music or whatever primarily. But I have thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to like get a job at a Walmart just to try to unionize there? And like, if you get fired, make a big stink about it because you don't fucking care. Like, I have another thing I'll go back to, but
dude, music will always be there. Look, my guitar is right behind me. Anytime I want to pick it up, but and I do get sad that I maybe abandon it at some point. But let's talk about what's important at this particular juncture in day and age. It's like doing what you just said might be good. Look, I could
a good practice, yeah.
And I couldn't pick up the guitar and have a good time or expect for me to get anywhere in the world if I see that there's all this other problems. I just can't. And if I think that I could do better by doing something else, and like this whole podcast thing was in order to help quell the anxiety of and talk to you and be like, isn't it screwed up? And you're like, yeah, it's screwed up. And we feel a bit better about it. And then maybe we can rally, maybe we can get together and do something about it. And so I'm doing what I can with very little sacrifice to push this message. Rather, if I sing a song about how I feel and that provides value to people, but is it value that's necessary?
I don't even believe in it.
It's really
like I don't make protest songs. Music is something different, Also, I'm like an instrumental musician.
Right. But it's personal. It's more personal, and the value can be more subjective than maybe an education. When you educate somebody on specific facts, it's a different kind of value that you're providing. But never ever gonna knock music. Obviously, me and you, we both love this stuff, and it's a spiritual thing. Like when I play for just myself now, and it's equally as valuable as performing in front of a crowd. I like performing in front of the crowd, but it's always there, and if I'm not listening to my own stuff, I'll listen to somebody else's. So music, but it's like we have to clean the house before we can play games, or so, essentially there's stuff that I think.
Well, I think you can do both. Like, you don't want it to just be an Ouroboros, right? Snake eating its own tail.
There's more. There's plenty of hours in the day for everything, right?
Yeah, like I think there's. Like when I keep a tally of all the topics that I try to maintain familiarity with, I have my main professional ones in already a bit diverse topics of like cello, how to play jazz, how to produce music. But then it's like, I'm learning about politics. And then I'm also trying to learn about history and economics so that I can talk more about that. And I'm trying to be able to work on the car. And, that for me is super fun. Like I love all that different stuff. And yeah, there is time. Like, I think you have to have like one main thing. I was actually curious if you feel, because like for me, my one main thing is so clearly like being an existential cellist. That's like why I still am a cellist, as opposed to having jumped ship to something with more overt political or social value. But it's like you, I feel the need to do more. So I have written like some scripts. My intention is to maybe compose music that goes along with it so that it's a little more artistic. If you know the channel Then and Now, it'd be like that, but like an additional emphasis on quality music to enhance the message. You just got to do what you can, and there's time. And like, you don't have to, you're only gonna, it's a recipe for failure to try to take the whole world on your shoulders.
That too. Look, you need dual things, like your talents and the skills that you have. It's like a Swiss Army knife. You can have just one talent and be really good at it, like a big sharp knife, and you'll be able to cut stuff. But if you have all these other tools, you will just be able to do more things and navigate the world. And the world will hypothetically become easier for you if you can diversify some of the things that you can do. And
the left may not have capital, but we can still build talents.
Yeah, and this is something that I wish that people like us could still get paid for the value that we create in society as far as music. But as long as it's as hard as it is, we might as well look at other stuff. It's fixing a car. How invaluable is that to you at this time? And then the fact that, like, being creative and being somebody who's expressive and uses your brain and uses your hands, it transcends everything, from the way you play the cello to the way you brush your teeth. There will be these behaviors that transcend just because of who you are. So it's like, don't be bound by medium. Just go as any direction that you feel like you can go. And I can just tell you personally that your cello is so good that 99% of the people on earth will just say, yeah, he's a cello guy and he's really good. They don't know the subtleties and difference between you and Yo-Yo Ma or somebody who's a better cellist than you or whatever. They can't make that differentiation. So if you can, get that reaction out of people, and that's kind of what I did. I got to a point where I played music and I realized, well, I'm just good enough for most people. I can rock a crowd. I can, and I can entertain myself. Well, and like you're a smart guy. You're a curious guy. You need to see. You're like, well, what is that? Tell me about that. I want to learn about that. It's just like a natural state of being. So don't be a one-trick pony. Be totally proud to be multi-faceted, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely feel like a little scared to move too far from a significant chunk of time on music, because that's the only thing holding together making an income from it.
Right. But here you are wasting time with me.
But it's okay. But it's not even wasting time. It literally just goes back to like planning time. And yeah, I mean, like the end goal of socialism is that people have more time to be able to dedicate to being good at music if that's what they want to do, or anything. So I certainly don't think that any of us should like deny ourselves the pursuit of those things as well now. But if you're only doing that, I certainly don't know how you would. It's certainly too hard to ignore what's going on societally and globally.
And that's it.
So, but everybody can bring something to it. And you and me, and we're figuring it out.
This is another aspect of capitalism that evolved over time, is where people used to be like us, where they could do, they were good at one thing, but they were also good at various other things because they were just smart and they were handy and they could do all this stuff. But capitalism is what drove us into specialities, where you're a mechanic that works on trains, or now you're a public relations assistant. The definition of what we're supposed to be good at became narrower and narrower, to where they only want what in German we call it a Fachidioten, or an idiot savant, somebody who's only really good at one thing. But I don't believe that that's our natural state, No,
I don't think so. Especially because from what we know of early man, we were working basically the same number of hours as we are capable of putting hard work into, like 4 to 6 hours in a day of like truly hard work. Like there are actually jobs where people are working super hard, like in like fast food work, like truly like 8+ hours. But at like a 8-hour office job, it's still going to be 4 to 6 hours of real work in a day.
Yeah. And still, and the disconnect between the work, which is huge for me. It's like purposeless work where people don't understand why they do what they do. They just do it for the paycheck. Way different than the people I've met that do something with a passion, which everybody always raves about. If you do what you love and, you never work a day in your life. But it's with that kind of the capitalist thing, and where Walmart comes in and corporations have taken the ability for us to find jobs that we are passionate about. So we have to play music and then completely suffer and wonder why we're undervalued.
I mean, that's also partly the condition of music. Like, it's never been easy. I was watching a good video by the YouTuber Ben Jordan, who's like a really successful musician and a really he understands a lot of this political stuff. I can tell from the way that he talks. And he had a video that came out about AI called AI Art, a Solution Without a Problem. And he's like, the reason we have such screwy copyright laws that we do right now for like sound recordings is that stuff was legislated before people fully understood what the implications of recorded music truly were going to be. And you had musicians who essentially bought into capitalist propaganda when they were like, well, I don't want people to just be able to share around my music. And it's like, no, that is what you want. That is what being a successful musician is that your music has been shared a lot. So it's people who are like really defending the wallet of certain industries who are using that music to make money for people who don't even have that musical talent or whatever. That's like a tale as old as time. And like, it's certainly not going to get any better or worse. Like one of the things I do think is really nice to notice about the fact that like I was still performing at private stuff that people would like find me online to book for all through COVID pretty much. Music is not the wasted major that it can be made out to be. It's not at the end of the day, music is meaningless that it's made out to be. If things are going bad in the world and you are talented at music, then you will be able to find a place among people. That is one of the truths of music. So it's not like a wasted pursuit.
No.
I did want to say, speaking of specialization, and just to talk very briefly, I obviously mostly wanted this to be a political conversation, but just to talk very briefly about the music I do make. You made the comparison to Yo-Yo Ma, and there's no way to compare that because I have completely quit classical music, and Yo-Yo Ma, for all of his endeavors into other genres, is fundamentally a European art music cellist in how he approaches things. And one of the things that, you know, if anybody watching does go and watch my stuff, my music, you're going to see basically somebody who's playing cello like somebody would play guitar. That it's you figure out how to actually shape the music, and you use, you know, a combination of your intuitions and trying to get it, like, absorb more music that other people have done over time. It's that approach. It's not like, oh, these are notes and this is how we'll play it in a correct way. It is a lot more connectivity there and a lot more fluidity there.
You're an artist rather than somebody who's just reading or studying somebody else's work. Yeah.
And capitalistically, market-wise, that's what sets me apart. People feel that. They're like, oh, this isn't just a cellist. This is somebody who's going to make the music as though I were making it, how I would want to do it. And I didn't even grow up being like the whole, like, oh, you got to, I mean, I was lucky enough to have lessons from a young age, but I didn't practice. So when I got into music, it was like in middle school, like other people who just start liking it and then want to pursue it. So I am very much like any other normal person in that way, in terms of like what I've wanted from music is likely very similar to what somebody, you know, who doesn't know music would want from it, likely.
Yeah. Do you have people that are like your contemporaries or your peers that you look at and you say, I like this guy's cello style? This is, because obviously, yeah, Yo-Yo Ma was just the first name that came to my head, but I don't know. People like Ian Cook is a friend of mine. He's an excellent cello player. But there's not a lot of them out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of cellists. There's a lot of cellists who are trying to do really cool things. I think it has yet to break certain thresholds in like how widespread good production, like audio production of cello will get. Also, the fact that so much music today is not innovative or explorative, but rather like the cello is typically going to be used in the way you're used to a cello being used. So like when my main thing, I would say, is that I'm a strong improviser, that I don't need a part for your music, that I'm going to be able to take like a bitch and solo. That stuff requires a new market entirely. And so I do think there's a lot of cellists who are trying to do cool things. But I think the fact that like I haven't blown up yet completely either is like a testament to that thing, that like it's still in development to some extent. Whereas the successful like cello cover channels always have an extremely like mainstreamed, you know, sense of production, that there's clearly some money in there, that there's a consistency to the product they're delivering, being this, oh, cello is the music of the heart sort of content. And that is only partially what I'm capable of making.
Right. That's just, so that's like
it's not so consistent.
Yeah. You're like, I can do cheesy fucking like, you know, the people that you see busking in the city square that are making all the money, they always are singing the Beatles songs and like doing the cheesy shit. I'm like, dude, I wanted to do something original and different and something rooted way more in history, but like way more different and stuff. Yeah, did you hear my violin player on that record I made?
Oh, I thought that was you. They sounded amazing.
No, that's my buddy. That dude's fucking sick. And he's a real artist where I said, make it more crunchy. And he was just like, okay. I could say any adjective.
I did not expect the violin playing to be as good as it was in the record. And it has such a great it really made me think of the Neutral Milk Hotel, that band.
Oh yeah.
The kind of wonky vibe, and yeah. It was great.
That's my old
folksy.
Yeah, it's my
folk rock
lopsided
sort of.
attempt at making a record, but and I can only talk good about the people that were on that record because got surrounded by the best in that time. I wish I could play violin like that, but he is like you in the sense that you are. I can tell if I had to play some Asian shit, and you'd be able to play that scale and play with a certain rhythm and flavor that other people can do. But it is really hard for people to understand that because, like you said, the watered down modern sound, which you remember in the 60s and 70s, there were artists that were truly artists that were paid by record companies to go and just do your thing and whatever. And then slowly they realized that it's just a pain in the ass when these people become delinquent and they start being anti-corporate or they start being activists and stuff, and the artists were just hard to deal with. And so nowadays it's like American Idol. They'll get somebody who's got talent and come in and craft their image, craft their sound, have producers craft a product, and then put that artist into debt under a record contract, and then say, all right, now here's a cash advance, but you have to make your movie, you have to make your music video, you have to make your album with this money that we're giving you, and you have to pay us back when you sell these records. And a lot of them never recoup the money that they're given, and they spend the rest of the time like chained to a corporate record label. And there's nothing more fake and flimsy.
I mean, I certainly like tried to figure out if I could like have some institutional help with success in music when I moved to LA. Of course, any record deal is like what you just described, where it's like, this is a huge amount of risk for me. But also there's like anybody who's just going to be able to help you as a manager or producer type is saying the same thing. Oh, like, put some things together on social media, build up hype. And it's just like, at a certain point, it was like, there's people here, they're hiring me for gigs, but yeah, I'm just going to work on the social media, because if that's what I'm going to need anyway for somebody else to come along and profit massively off of it, I'll just do it.
Yeah. And then,
and have that be the end goal. Yeah.
And then you're not playing cello anymore. You're actually just on Instagram trying to fucking make, and I've been there. But that there is no really other way. There's like no middle ground between being a corporate stooge and being completely hungry. And like, I have certain friends who do. Well,
what I would recommend to people who want to make music, because one of the things that like I think often gets misunderstood is people will be like this, it's this either or thing, like music, it should be fully enjoyable. You shouldn't be tying it to money. Once you try to make your passion your job, it's not really your passion anymore, or it's not your hobby anymore, at least. But I think that is I feel like that criticism is spoken with a sort of mental fortitude that I do not have. I need what I'm working on to be able to feedback loop and make it easier to keep working on it. So for that reason, it makes sense for the quality of the music to be making money from music. And all you need to really understand at its core about like making money from music versus not is that if you are an artist, then you are almost certainly not making money from music. If you are an artist, even a big artist, you're losing a bunch of money on promotional stuff, the cost of tour. You're not recouping that. Lady Gaga loses money on tour, I was reading, because it costs millions for her to go do that. It's just not recouped in ticket sales. Artists are the people who pay producers, who pay me to come add cello to their song that will get a few thousand listens. And so I have definitely limited what I even expect of artistry. It would be cool to come up with, a community around my channel through which, more selective content can be available through a Patreon subscription model. But I don't even think that's my main goal. My main goal is just to make really good music that draws people in. I will get hired from that. And that's what I know, because what you can make money from is when you have a skill. And even though I don't think that the market rate for what you can make from music in any way actually matches the total work that goes in, it's not one of those situations where the price actually reflects the effort that goes into it. Or even the innate.
You can't quantify how awesome music is. Come on.
Yeah. So the thing about that is, I do think if you want to be a musician, you have to make sure that you have skills. You have to teach yourself things like music theory. In my case, I can play basically any genre on the cello. I actually understand the genres. Like I actually spend time thinking. I practice different scales. I think about how they work over chords. Like it's a philosophical enterprise that has a lot of like actual things that you can hang your coat up on if you're disciplined about learning it. Being good with logic, you can actually help people edit. Being good with music notation, you can be putting things together. But if you don't have like skills that are going to support someone else's artistic vision, then that's when you're really not really going to make any money from music. So if you want to make money from the stuff you do, it has to be grounded in skills, and you have to be willing to compromise on other things in your life, other securities, because you are going to make less money. So, if you're able to be more self-reliant, if you're able to put something like that together while still doing it, and then you're skill-based and you're finding customers who need that skill, that is the way that you can actually make it a, what would they call it? A trade.
Yeah.
An actual trade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For all you kids out there who want to be good at music and want to, make it or whatever, yeah. Aim first to be good at your craft. Forget everything else. And then make it a trade, make it something that you put in the time to do, and worry about all that other shit after you've got the chops. Because I made the mistake also of, marketing nothing, basically. But you should be aiming to be a session musician in the sense that you can sit in with anybody and play anything, because then you will truly be a good musician, right?
Yeah, strive to be a good musician, to understand the music and to be able to be intuitively live within it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. Yeah. And that's where I was saying earlier, music just does require discipline. It's one of the things that can feel toxic about music school, and I certainly don't think it should be. It's got to be handled with care. But the reality is, if you want to be good at music, you have to put several hours a day into it. I split that up between music production and cello, but I'm still practicing cello 90 to 120 minutes a day.
Yeah. But then,
you gotta do it.
But put in that vertical integration after you've managed your chops. Then you go over to Logic, or you go over to figuring out how to book shows or make videos and stuff like that. Come after you've got something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes without saying. Have you ever considered going anywhere else in the country in order to? Because I lived in New Orleans, I lived in Austin, I lived in New York City for a while, and New York State. Is there any other place that you would go if you thought you could make it as a musician?
Probably not. I really love the West Coast. I think that traveling in some of those other states makes traveling with cannabis a lot trickier.
Oh, sure.
At least right now still. And despite the gas prices being higher on the West Coast than anywhere else in the country, it's still a great place to be. Like, there's a reason it's expensive here. Like, There's a lot of value people find in
look at
having this sort of thing. This is not what Nebraska looks like. I'll tell you that, dude.
Right.
I'm thankful every day that I can go on a hike. We meditate and do yoga every day, and I'm thankful every day that I'm in like a mountain. It just brings such clarity of thought. I don't know if I could get that. And I did look, because my dad sent me this Princeton master's PhD combo program. Since obviously I didn't finish my master's, you could go straight into it. And I was vaguely interested for a little bit, because I was like, wow, this actually, there's an incredible amount of creative freedom that they're giving to these people. And it's a fully funded program. But then it's like, sure, but then we have to live in an apartment.
Yeah.
And be stuck in one place. And it's a hard thing to give up. Once you're used to it, once you fold it inside out, it's very hard when you're tied to the whole subscription model of living, where you have to pay rent every month, to even imagine what it would really feel like. But then once you're used to being homeless, the freedom element is so hard to go back on.
I have that all the time now, but I was I was able to stop and go cold turkey and then get into an apartment, and slowly we got into a nicer and nicer place, and now we're in a pretty doggone nice place. And let me tell you something, being able to shit in a real toilet first thing in the morning or any time that the thing, fucking awesome. Awesome. Don't need to ask anybody. It used to be that
I can't, I mean, we have as many bathrooms as you want, dude. Talk about having to take a shit and all you can see is whatever art you happen to put up on the wall versus you get to see an immense natural scenery. You get to step outside. You get to take a small walk over to the bag you're holding it all in.
Sure.
Oh, it's amazing, brother. Come on.
But what about the food? You have to go to the store periodically and get some food and water and stuff, right?
And we have a cooler and we have an ice maker, so we don't have to keep buying ice outright. And we fill up like 30 gallons of water that's on the roof, and we have a stove / heater. So I get hot food, hot showers twice a week, and otherwise I just do a sponge bath every day. I mean, it's basically indistinguishable from what people can provide for themselves in an apartment.
Well, this is truly like the anarcho-primitive thing that you're doing, because and really when I did it, I was stupid enough to stay in the city most of the time, which was horrible. Did you ever have trouble?
A lot harder.
Did you ever get trouble waking up by the cops or just dangerous situations?
Oh, sure. Dangerous situations, I don't know. We do usually try to, I feel safe going anywhere, but now that I'm married, I do feel that like twinge where it's like some places are not so safe. We don't stay there. I think some people wouldn't have the choice. Like if you're living in your car, but still have to be tied to your neighborhood and you don't have gas. And that's a super hard position to be in, because like it even felt like an uphill battle just getting to the van. Like that was like such a huge accomplishment, because just being able to save up the couple of grand for like the old van is like a real big hurdle to cross. So I don't know if I have a great suggestion as far as that goes, but yeah, I mean, you definitely get cops called. Like one time I went over to somebody's house to record in their like home studio, and I come out and there's like a fucking cop who'd gotten called on the van. My wife is like there, and I'm like, hey, I'm sure you can understand why I came. And of course I was chilling. I was like, yeah, sure. Well, but like what I should have said is, no, why'd you come?
Yeah. Because I have nothing better to do.
Dude, I was there for like 2 hours to record for this person, and his neighbor's like, I don't know, there's a van here.
Yeah.
Like basically if the cops do come, it's always very, very soon. Like, and they'll be like, you've been here for a while? And it's like, no, I've been here 40 minutes. Like, you guys have a great response time for a van being parked here, I'll tell you.
Yeah. This was the thing. I wasn't, by the time I was your age, I was off the road because the experience was so fucking bad, because I was
How old are you?
I'm 30. I'm going to be 38 this year.
Okay.
So and the older I got, the more I just got bogged down with the lack of freedom. And the other thing is when you park on a street in the van, that streets are like this, and you have cars over here and cars over here parked, and it's a street, but it's a little arch. So when you park,
you got to find the right. Yeah. So here's the tricks. Here's the tricks I have. If you have some gas to be able to go around, your temptation is going to want to be to park near a park, but only sometimes is that actually going to work out, because people also know that that's like an attractive option for homeless people. So what you want to look for instead are apartments or streets of industry, things where there's going to be a long road where, especially the apartment thing, I could be parked there to be visiting anybody. So I never have problems parking next to an apartment building. And then also sometimes there are these long streets that aren't actually next to anything. Even in residential areas, there can be these long stretches where there are parking spots and it's just a wall and the houses aren't even near you. Stuff like that. So That's what you want to look for if you're trying to do it in the city. The worst thing about parking in the city is that you have to keep moving. Yeah. And here I can be set up for days, which is like, I mean, it's a hard life. Like if you have to wake up move to the park where you're going to spend most of the day. You have to also go supplement with whatever work you're doing. Then you have to find a spot to park at night. It's certainly exhausting.
Yeah. There was a time in my life when I was in San Francisco, we lived on a school bus that was full size, painted multicolors, living with a bluegrass group. And the thing was fueled by vegetable oil, but the law within San Francisco said that you have to move your car every 72 hours, 1/10 of a mile. So during that time, meter maids would come by and they would mark your tires with a little crayon or something and say, oh, this guy's been here this long. And it's just fascist fucking bullshit. And we'd have to get the thing and move it around. Well, you couldn't legally sleep in the thing, but what's the definition of being legally asleep? And so the cops would show up. They would just try to catch you at 7 a.m. and they would knock on the door and you'd come in your pajamas and you'd say, hey, how you doing? And they say, you guys aren't sleeping in here, are you? And if you said yes, they'd fucking take your ass to jail. And if you said, no, we're just working on some stuff right here, then they would say, okay, well, you can't sleep here. And then they would just come, and they would do that every single time. And so we did. We parked in the industrial part of San Francisco. And subsequently would just get chased out of every area in San Francisco eventually, where they say, okay.
There's nothing left there. We've tried there too. You cannot park within like a 2-hour drive. Same with, actually parking around LA, because it's more of a desert area, is easier. The Bay Area, yeah, there's nothing.
How far from LA proper are you?
2.5 hours.
Wow, that's a long way away. That's good.
So we have all our stuff set up in Santa Barbara. So if I don't have a gig, then all we have to do is drive less than an hour for supplies once a week. But otherwise, I have to make sure that the gig covers all of that, which limits the number anyway. So
yeah.
Kind of works out. But I'm doing Christmas gigs, making just barely 4 figures for several church services. And it's just a couple days in and then we get back out.
Not too much bills on the other side where you don't have to worry about spending too much. You have groceries, you got maybe some internet on your phone. That's it, right? Little gas.
Paying off some credit cards.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Now you are a true American. Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. No, it really reminds me of all my travels. I used to drive around at night stoned and be so paranoid that I would pick the wrong spot. And I was like, I don't want to get woken up in the morning by a cop or anybody else. And it would happen every once in a while. I'd just pick the wrong spot and be woken up by the police. And it's just, at some point, I really didn't like that anymore. And of course, when you wake up in San Francisco proper, you had to have $2 in your pocket when you woke up, so that you could go to the coffee store, get yourself a latte, and then use the toilet, because we weren't defecating like in bags or on the streets, or we didn't have a toilet or anything like that. And so that was one of the number one reasons why I was really happy to get off the road, was the toilet. Yeah,
figuring out the bag thing and figuring out getting a big apple juice bottle to pee in.
Oh,
so you don't have to step outside every time.
Yeah.
Cute, life changing, bro.
Yeah.
And I did want to say, as far as the cops go and like the fascism, it's like it's like it's so dumb. It's like the people saying, oh, the problem with the homeless is that there's so many lazy people. Well, people already know how hard van life is because they know that they don't want to do it, like most people. And then they see people doing it and they're so angry that somebody can manage to escape the system that even they themselves, making more money, are nonetheless still in, that they rage and they just want to be, no, this isn't hard enough, obviously, because you're not deterred. It's like, dude, you're never going to deter me.
Yeah. Dude, this is like the classic conservative fascist viewpoint, which is, I care about freedom, right? They always holler about, oh, freedom, freedom, freedom. They care about their freedom, and they want us to conform to what they consider to be freedom. It's about, you do what I say. That's what all it is. And if you're not doing,
I'll give you a little trick for decoding. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The trick for decoding conservative messaging is that it is all fucking projection. Every single thing that they lobby against the left is what they're doing. They'll say that there's a secret cabal of globalists when there is an open cabal of billionaires. They'll say that, we want freedom, because they're trying to appeal to the humanist messaging, when it's left-wing values who actually value people's freedom. They'll say that, oh, these people are grooming the kids.
Pedophiles.
When not only do they fuck, when not only do they try to indoctrinate their children with Christianity, which is why they think that's what the left is doing, because that's what they do. They are indoctrinating their children with Christianity, and they think, oh, you're indoctrinating the kids. Oh, and then the right wing, they're the ones who are pedophile apologists and think the age of consent is bullshit. So of course they're like, oh, these other people are pedophiles. Every single thing is projection. Every single thing is something that is distinctly part of that culture.
I like your theories, man. I want to subscribe to your newsletter, bro. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, man. Ah, the pedophile thing too. It's like Matt Gaetz and all these people. There's like, and they're worried about Jeffrey Epstein. Look, pedophilia and the lusting for small, tight, young asses is all tied into the lust for power, and that's tied into the lust of money and the lust of control and everything like this. So, but don't, the real crux here is like the fucking reactionary politics will always reign supreme and be more interesting. Just like in the Randolph Hearst days when they knew that they could sell you, tabloid magazines were selling faster than actual real news. Our brains we don't have a chance. We like the excitement of conspiracy theories and fake fucking bullshit and news stories that tug at the heart and make us angry. Most of us can't go without it. I'm somebody who can read a fucking scientific paper and still get excited.
That is impressive.
I can get excited about it and go, oh yeah, okay, I kind of understand what's going on here. But I don't need to have this great emotional attachment to it in order for it to be entertaining. But most people do. And this is why Fox News is so popular, and CNN or the rest of them in their 24-hour news cycle. They are just pandering to the lowest common denominator and whatever sells. And they do it well, but it's ruining public discourse. Ancient Greeks already knew that democracy, whatever, didn't work because it was only as good as an informed and educated public. But I forget who it was, one of these old Greek philosopher guys. He was like, people just like to be angry. People just like to get the torches and pitchforks out. It's just the way it is. And it's really a question of will we say. And I really think that a technocratic dystopia is just the only next move. Not that I want that, but
it's scary, but yeah.
Because the left is going to do what it does best, which is splinter into smaller groups because of hyper individualistic thinking. We can't help it. Even though you like animals and I want freedom for black people, just because we disagree on that, we just cannot be comrades or something. This happens with every left-leaning liberal kind of movement, with very few exceptions. Like in the early 1900s when there was this great communist scare, or let's say they passed in the Russian Revolution happened in 1917, and then within that time period they passed the Espionage Act, which labeled a bunch of new people possible enemies of the state, possible just subversive kind of actors, and that includes socialists, communists, anarchists, and far right fucking nut bars. And what they did is they locked them all up into the same jail with each other, and they actually all got together and started hatching out schemes with each other. And I don't think
the right's good at obeying hierarchy.
Right.
What can you say? You got to. It goes back to the spectrum of human things. We got to harness that better for humanity.
Right. You got to know when to group together and say, all right, look. You're kind of a racist idiot, and I'm kind of a fucking soft liberal douche. Let's get together. Let's really figure out who's screwing us, because at the end of the day, it's the fucking rich that are screwing us all. So
yeah,
and I think it's a matter of time.
Everything else is splintering.
Right. I think it's a matter of time. Like we're gonna see it. Like even the right's funny right now because they're actually seeing it too, and you're like, oh, you're so close, almost. They're like, yeah, it's Klaus Schwab and the WEF. It's like, yeah, but you're wrong about a lot of the other stuff, but you're almost there. So
Yeah.
just don't tell him you're liberal, but try to make that change. But yeah, shout out to my man George Carlin, the late great George Carlin, because he's the one guy who keeps me sane, and he transcends both the left and the right in that way. And do you know George Carlin?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, and yeah, shout out to anybody.
Have you heard some of Bill Burr's recent socialist rants?
No, is he turning into a nice person, or is he still kind of?
Yeah. Look it up.
Okay, cool. Because we need all the good comedians we can get. I'm gonna have Doug Stanhope on my show in the next few weeks, who is also somebody who is a great voice of anti-authority and kind of dark humor. He talks about committing credit card fraud, and he said he had to wait till a certain statute of limitations ended so that he could tell this specific story and stuff. So he's also like a Lenny Bruce, George Carlin type. So we're looking out for that. I'll check out Bill Burr. He's been here and there with some of his stuff because
I know.
Sometimes it's kind
but
of
he
dumb
also
and
seems
hateful.
to just be looking at things like as he sees them, which is, I think, what's setting him apart.
Not that he's not funny. His bit about dogs made me cry. I was like, you come home from work all pissed off and tired, and your dog just comes up to you and is like, I love you, you're awesome. And you're just like, no, man, you're awesome. I just love that, dude. I don't know.
So I came out here with a fully charged phone, but I think also the sun having been faced towards you has been draining it a little faster. So we could either wrap up, although I'm having a great time, or I can go try to grab a cord.
Why don't we just do it again next week? I don't give a rat's behind. You can be a correspondent.
Okay.
My man in the field.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I mean, this conversation inspires the shit out of me to like work harder on the content where I actually do at least say something, even if I still try to make it artistic, that it's not so vague as like just music that can be endlessly interpreted. A little bit more clear.
Yeah, you are incredibly unique and incredibly gifted at not just cello, but what this conversation we had. I can't have these conversations with just anybody, and I tell you, there are a lot of people out there that need to hear what you have to say because you have this baseline just awareness of what's going on. So dip your feet in all the areas of the pool. Do your cello, but come back and let's have another round of like stuff we want to talk about, and we'll weave back and forth. You write your notes, and then you call me and say, "Hey, let's do it again." It felt good, right? Feels good. It was great to talk to you.
I knew that there was like maybe like a couple % chance we wouldn't hit it off, like being almost too similar, but like an overwhelmingly likely shot of actually having a conversation with someone who's pretty much on the same page with everything. I can dip into music, but I can brand politically, and you're going to be there. Yeah, most people aren't politically informed.
Not that either.
My most politically informed friend is my one who went to law school.
And he's on the dark side. He's working for the law.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, look, there's two aspects of it. There's knowing your shit, and then there's just being nice. And if you have these two things, then it's great. It makes great entertainment. We could disagree on stuff, but as long as you're nice, then it's still entertaining and informative and still sort of enriching in a way. But like poor Vosh and Destiny, these two people can't get along. I think Vosh is a great human being and very compassionate, but Destiny's kind of a whiny, arrogant human being. And I saw that right away. And I said, well, if I had to pick a side, I'd pick this kid. But what's sad is, once again, splintering away. These two could be a cohesive unit, trudging forward, trying to make changes. But for a lot of left people, it's more important that they have this individualistic opinion about everything.
Yeah.
I have lost that. I have no reason to get up on a high horse about anything. Right.
That's why I say, I'm philosophically, I love the anarchistic thoughts, especially the mutualism, individualism stuff. But in my heart of hearts, what I truly believe is probably the most stable system is democratic socialism. And I know it's not sexy, but probably that is the best actual like working system. So anything in between there, you know, I'm definitely going to be a wholehearted support of. Even just moving the Overton window is like a step in the right direction.
The important is we know who we don't like. You know, I'll put up with anarchists.
United in hate.
Yeah, anarchists.
No, not that.
Yeah, anarchist, socialist, democratic, liberal. You know, okay, great. Let's do it. I don't care. I'll sign up for any one of those. But the conservative, Christian, nationalist, racist, fascist stuff, it's for dummies.
I mean, there's good videos out there that talk about how it's really a quite sad ideology that ends in a barren wasteland ideologically, and as an idealized society in which everybody ultimately kills each other.
And if you know your history, which you recommend, I recommend everybody out there who may be watching, go out and read your history, go out and learn your history, because you'll see quite clearly what works and what doesn't. Even authoritarian communism, you know, of course, Stalin, Mao, they had a good idea, they did it wrong. So, well, I can admit that.
Yeah, I mean, Stalin had a lot of good things to say. Oh, wait, no, sorry. I meant to say Vladimir Lenin had a lot of good things to say. Yeah. But, you know, it doesn't mean that system, you know, wasn't without its problems. Also, it wasn't a system that existed, you know, in slight defense of it. It wasn't a system that existed completely independently from everything else. U.S. hegemony was a huge part of the reason why they were still starved for resources. Cuba
as well. When you talk about them having to stick to their guns being socialist, which they've successfully were able to do it for as long as they had to be authoritative dicks about it, because there was this constant threat of imperialist, you know, intervention. So until the whole world is on board with socialism, then there will always need to be some kind of oppressive kind of aspect to it. But, you know, another time, another place, we'll get to that next time.
Sounds good. It's been great talking, man.
Justin Lepard, wonderful human being, cello player. He's going to come back next week. We'll do it again. Seriously, I'll talk to you anytime. We'll make.
I'll send you a message after Christmas, and if next week makes sense, I'm down.
Yeah. We'll just keep the wheels moving, because this is effortless for me, and I think it's providing value for people. So let's do it again.
Hopefully, dude.
All right.
It's like the first time saying something.
Right.
For me. Yeah.
Well, welcome.
All right, man.
Welcome to the world. All right. Wave goodbye to everybody out there. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.